Alright, welcome to another video. This is going to be in my wild networking series. Feel like I'm kind of neglecting that series a bit. It's, I think, probably one of my most valuable series. I just recently got a errata published in the official BGP RFC, so I think that's really what's going to go the furthest for me is building up those fundamentals in my career path of network engineering and kind of earning some legitimate nerd credits. So last video, and then this was a while ago, so we're going to go to my channel here, and we're going to go to playlists, and then we're going to go to Python, to wild networking. So last video, I was reading just the most dry, boring, awful section of the RFC imaginable. I actually couldn't remember where I left off or what I had read, but since then I figured out that this is the next section to read. Alright, so let's try to get through as much as we can. I've only got about 15 minutes. Timer events. Event 9. Connect, retry, timer expires. Definition. An event generated when the connect, retry timer expires. Status, mandatory. Event 10. Hold timer expires. Definition. An event generated when the hold timer expires. Status, mandatory. Event 11. Keep alive timer expires. Definition. Let me guess. An event generated when the keep alive timer does not expire. Oh, I was wrong. It's actually an event generator when the keep alive timer does expire. Status, mandatory. Event 12, delay open timer expires. Definition. An event generated when the delay open timer expires. Status, optional. Optional attribute status. If this event occurs, number 1, delay open attribute should be set to true. Number 2, delay open time attribute should be supported. Number 3, delay open timer should be supported. Event 13, idle hold timer expires. Definition, an event generated when the idle hold timer expires, indicating that the BGP connection has completed waiting for the back off period to prevent BGP peer oscillation. The idle hold timer is only used when the persistent peer oscillation damping function is enabled by setting the damp peer oscillations optional attribute to true. Implementations not implementing the persistent peer oscillation damping function may not have the idle hold timer. Status, optional. Optional attribute status. If this event occurs, number 1, damp peer oscillations attribute should be set to true. Number 2, idle hold timer should have just expired. Next section, TCP connection-based events. Event 14, TCP connection valid. Definition, event indicating the local system reception of a TCP connection request with a valid source IP address, TCP port, destination IP address, and TCP port. They listed that twice. The definition of invalid source and invalid destination IP address is determined by the implementation. BGP's destination port should be port 179 as defined by IANA. TCP connection request is denoted by the local system receiving a TCP SYN. Status, optional. Optional attribute status. 1. The track TCP state attribute should be set to true if this event occurs. Event 15, TCP CR invalid. Definition, event indicating the local system reception of a TCP connection request with either an invalid source address or port number or an invalid destination address or port number. BGP destination port number should be 179 as defined by IANA. A TCP connection request occurs when the local system receives a TCP SYN. Status optional. Optional attribute status. Number 1. The track TCP state attribute should be set to true if this event occurs. Event 16. TCP CR ACT. Definition. Event indicating the local system's request to establish a TCP connection to the remote peer. The local system's TCP connection sent a TCP SYN, received a TCP SYN ACK message, and sent a TCP ACK. Status mandatory. Event 17. TCP connection confirmed. Definition. Event indicating that the local system has received a confirmation that the TCP connection has been established by the remote site. The remote peer's TCP engine sent a TCP SYN. The local peer's TCP engine sent a SYN ACK message and now has received a final ACK. Status mandatory. Event 18. TCP connection fails. Definition. Event indicating that the local system has received a TCP connection failure notice. The remote BGP peer's TCP machine could have sent a FIN. The local peer would respond with a FIN ACK. Another possibility is that the local peer indicated a timeout in the TCP connection and downed the connection. Status mandatory. Next section is BGP message-based events. Event 19, BGP open. Definition. An event is generated when a valid open message has been received. Status mandatory. Optional attribute status. Number 1. The delay open optional attribute should be set to false. Number 2. The delay open timer should not be running. Event 20. BGP open with delay open timer running. Definition. An event is generated when a valid open message has been received for a peer that has a successfully established transport connection and is currently delaying the sending of a BGP open message. Status optional. Optional attribute status. Number 1. The delay open attribute should be set to true. Number 2. The delay open timer should be running. Event 21. BGP header error. Definition. An event is generated when a received BGP message header is not valid. Status mandatory. Event 22. BGP open message error. Definition. An event is received when an open message has been received with errors. Status mandatory. Event 23. Open collision dump. Definition. An event generated administratively when a connection collision has been detected while processing an incoming open message, and this connection has been selected to be disconnected. See section 6.8 for more information on collision detection. Event 23 is an administrative action generated by implementation logic that determines whether this connection needs to be dropped per the rules in section 6.8. This event may occur if the FSM, standing for finite state machine, is implemented as two linked state machines. Status is optional. Optional attribute status. If the state machine is to process this event in the established state, number 1, collision detect established state optional attribute should be set to true. Please note the open collision dump events can occur in idle, connect, active, open send, and open confirm without any optional attributes being set. Event 24, not if message var error. Definition. An event is generated when a notification message with version error is received. Status mandatory. Event 25, not if message. Definition. An event is generated when a notification message is received and the error code is anything but version error. Status. Mandatory. Event 26. Message. Keep alive message. Definition. An event is generated when a keep alive message is received. Status mandatory. Event 27. Update message. Definition. An event is generated when a valid update message is received. Status. Mandatory. Event 28. Update message error. Definition. An event is generated when a valid update message is received. Status. Mandatory. Next section is description of FSM. FSM definition. BGP must maintain a separate FSM, standing for finite state machine, for each configured peer. Each border gateway protocol peer paired in a potential connection will attempt to connect to the other, unless configured to remain in the idle state or configured to remain passive. For the purpose of this discussion, the active or connecting side of the TCP connection, the side of a TCP connection sending the first TCP SYN packet, is called outgoing. The passive or listening side, the sender of the first SYNEC, is called an incoming connection. See section 8.2.1.1 for information on the terms active and passive used below. A BGP implementation must connect to and listen on port 179 for incoming connections in addition to trying to connect to peers. For each incoming connection, a state machine must be instantiated. There exists a period in which the identity of the peer on the other end of an incoming connection is unknown. But the BGP identifier, is known, but the BGP identifier is not known. That's interesting. Okay. During this time, both an incoming and outgoing connection may exist for some time, configuring peering. This is referred to as a connection collision. A BGP implementation will have at most one FSM for each configured peering, plus one FSM for each incoming TCP connection for which the peer has not yet been identified. Each FSM corresponds to exactly one TCP connection. There may be more than one connection between a pair of peers if the connections are configured to use a different pair of IP addresses. This is referred to as multiple configured peerings to the same peer. Next section is the terms active and passive. The terms active and passive have been in the Internet operators vocabulary for almost a decade and have proven useful. The words active and passive have slightly different meanings when applied to a TCP peer or TCP connection or a peer. There is only one active side and one passive side to any one TCP connection per the definition above and the state machine below. When a TCP speaker is configured as active, it may end up on either the active or passive side of the connection that eventually gets established. Once the TCP connection is completed, it doesn't matter which end was active and which was passive. The only difference is in which side of the TCP connection has port 179. The other side will be an ephemeral port in a certain range, a very high range. Okay, next section, FSM and collision detection. There is one FSM per BGP connection. When the connection collision occurs prior to determining what peer a connection is associated with, there may be two connections for one peer. After the connection collision is resolved, the FSM for the connection that is closed should be disposed. Next section is FSM and optional session attributes. Optional session, I'm just laughing because this is reminding me of my brain is a bit wonky, so like sometimes like memories like just pop up from nowhere, and like funny memories make me laugh, so sometimes I just laugh like at random times. Like if my memory is like, if my recall, because my recall is like really weird, so like sometimes I like my recall gets triggered and I just like vividly remember like details in my life, and it kind of sucks. Like, you know, sometimes, you know, if it's a fun, happy thing, you know, I'll laugh like I did, but like a lot of the times it's not. So I kind of wish that wouldn't happen, but and you can see how distracting it is. I should be focusing on this. I've only got like a few minutes left. Okay, but the next section is going to be FSM and optional session attributes. We'll finish after this section. And the next video in the Wild Network series will be on Fsm Event Numbers. Optional session attributes specify either attributes that act as flags, true or false, or optional timers. For additional attributes that act as flags, if the optional session attribute can be set to true on the system, the corresponding BGP FSM actions must be supported. For example, if the following options can be set in a BGP implementation, auto start and passive TCP establishment, then events 3, 4, and 5 must be supported. If an optional session attribute cannot be set to true, the events supporting that set of options do not have to be supported. Each of the optional timers, delay open timer and idle hold timer, has a group of attributes that are flag indicating support, time set in timer, timer. The two optional timers show this format: delay open timer, delay open time, delay open timer. Idle hold timer, damp pure oscillations, idle hold time, idle hold timer. If the flag indicating support for an optional timer, delay open, or damp pure oscillations cannot be set to true, the timers and events supporting that option do not have to be supported. And I lied. We're going to stop at this one actually. Fsm event numbers. The Fsm numbers 1 through 28 utilized in this state machine description aid in specifying the behavior of the BGP state machine. Implementations may use these numbers to provide network management information. The exact form of an FSM or the Fsm events are specific to each implementation. Fsm actions that are implemented independent. At certain points, the BGP Fsm specifies that BGP initialization will occur or that BGP resources will be deleted. The initialization of the BGP Fsm and the associated resources depend on the policy portion of the BGP implementation. The details of these actions are outside the scope of the Fsm document. Okay, so this is where we're going to stop. We'll be coming back to this section in part 11 of this series. So I'm going to need to, I got to stop the video, upload it, and I'll see you in the next one.